Hey guys, it's Applemint. Welcome back again to my channel. So as promised, I'm slowly bringing in more fall decorations. I'm waiting until October 1st to bring my Halloween stuff into this room, but for now, I'm starting to decorate for the fall. I was at Michael's the other day finding some decorations, and I saw the dreaded, I'm just gonna roll the clip. They think we don't notice, but they're there, and I know they're there, and I'm on to you, Michaels. Anyway, for today's video, as the title says, I'm doing another tutorial. It's been quite a while since I've done one of these, and I've had so many requests to do a tutorial that revolved around coloring. So for today's video, I want to show you guys how to color some different kinds of eyes as well as different kinds of hairstyles. And also real quick, just a little announcement, I've got my Dangling Darlings Kickstarter still ongoing right now. So if you want to check that out, the link will be in the description box below. All of the pins will have a little animal and they're holding a second little charm that will dangle from their hands. So go check that out if you're interested. I've got a really cute Halloween themed one. I actually have two. So go take a look at that if you're interested and share the project with your family and friends. Anyway, let's get into the video. So for the purposes of coloring these eyes, we're gonna need 3 different shades of a color, a light, medium, and dark shade. So the first thing you're gonna do is take your lightest shade and just fill in the whole eye. The reason we're doing this is because we're going to be shading these from light to dark, meaning we're starting with our lightest colors and we're going and shading with our darker colors rather than starting with the dark colors and filling in the light areas. This is because it's a little bit more forgiving, especially if you're just learning. It's a lot easier to correct mistakes if you start light and move to dark rather than vice versa. So step 2, you're gonna grab your medium shade and make a diagonal line across each eye. You can make it horizontal if you want, but I like to add it at a bit of a slant. And then go ahead and color in that top half. And once you do that, you're going to make a U shape underneath that and fill that in as well. And that is going to be where we're gonna place the pupil later on. So fill in both eyes, and now you're gonna go and for step 3, take your darker shade that you have, and you're gonna shade about half of what you shaded before. So color in that top section of the eye. If you want, you can take your medium shade again and you can color over this to blend both of them together. That's a stylistic choice if you want. I prefer to do that when I'm coloring eyes because I do like the blended, faded look, but again, you don't have to do that. And then take that dark color and color right where we left that U shape before, and this will be the pupil of the eye. So really simple. Step 4 is completely optional. You can take an additional 4th shade, which is somewhere between the medium and light shade that we used, and section off that little bottom area there to make it more of a U shape, to define it a little bit more, but like I said, super optional. You don't have to do that part. So now moving on to step 5, you're going to take a gray marker and you're going to color in some of the whites of the eyes right underneath the eyelids just to give it a little bit of a shadow and break up the color a bit. It makes it look a little bit more realistic and natural. Step 6 is to take your gel pen, your white gel pen, or any kind of white opaque marker that you might have, a paint marker, maybe even just some white paint. Whatever you want to use, as long as it's opaque, go ahead and add some highlights into the eyes. This step for me, I believe, really changes the look of eyes. So if you make these really big, your person's gonna have really shiny eyes, or you can just choose to leave them out altogether and that'll completely change the style as well. So it's really up to you. I feel like this step really changes the look of the eyes overall. You can do this part however you want, but I like to add some shines in the top left corner, as well as a little sparkle if I have enough space in my drawing, which I do in this case. So those are the first style of eyes, and now I'm going to show you guys a similar style with a little bit of a different twist. So for these next eyes, you'll notice that the main difference is that before coloring, I'm going in and I'm adding a pupil with my black multi-liner. And so this is to give it a bit of a different look, a different style. The overall coloring for this one that I use is pretty similar, if not the same. However, I leave the center pupil open, I leave it white. So with this type of eye, you could choose not to add any highlights after coloring, because you could use that white pupil as the highlight if you wanted that kind of look, or you can go in like I'm about to do in a second and add in some highlights yourself as well. I think this type of eye style is also pretty cool. I do tend to switch back and forth between this type and the one that I just showed you before, but it's really just a preference, and I also just wanted to show you guys that you can pretty much get creative when coloring in eyes. And now I'm going to get into coloring some hair and showing you guys how to do that, as well as a few different styles, so why don't we get right into that right now. So to start, I've chosen 4 colors. I would say that when coloring hair, you would need at least a minimum of 3 colors to really get a nice blending. You could use 2, but I recommend a minimum of 3. So the first thing that I do is I take my base shade, which is my lightest shade of yellow here, and I go in and I just start coloring some areas in the hair, but I leave a space open where the highlight will be. So this is basically just for me to map out where I want to put that highlight on the top of her head. The next thing that I do is I take my slightly darker marker and I go in underneath the highlight. This is somewhat optional, but I think it gives it a cool look. Just kind of darken underneath and then go back with the color you used before and blend it out. I think it looks cool. It kind of gives the highlight a little bit more contrast against the hair. And then I go in with that same dark color and I shade toward the bottom of the bangs just to give them a little bit of shadowing and shading. The next thing I'll do is I'll go in and start filling in more of the hair with my base color, and of course leaving in more opportunities for highlights. I like to make hair pretty shiny, so not just on the top of the head, but also some toward the center or toward the middle, and also on some of her side bangs that are near her ears. I'll always add a little bit there. And depending how long the hair is, I'll try to disperse highlights throughout. In the back of the hair, underneath where her neck is, that's going toward the back of her head. So there would typically be more of a shadow, and you can signify that by adding more shading with your darker shade there as well. And then once I'm done, I go around the hair, I add some more shading into some areas that I feel could use a little extra. I'll take an even darker shade and I'll darken some of the areas that I already shaded just to give them a little bit more contrast. And I play around with it until I'm happy and find something that I like. So now I want to show you guys a way to color braids specifically, because braids can be a little tricky, but I want to show you guys how to do that next. So for coloring the braids, I'm going to start off, like I did in the other one, with my base color. So I start off by taking this purple and I map out the areas at the top of her head where I want the highlights to be, as well as keep in mind where I'm going to want to place them later. The next step is that I take my darker purple and I add little circles, little dots of darker purple right underneath the highlights to make it stand out a little more. After I'm done with the bangs area, I start to move my way down the head with my base color again, and I map out where I want the highlights on some of the other parts of her hair to be. Once I get down to the actual braid itself, I heavily keep in mind where I want to add all of the highlights. Like I said, you can't add white as easily as you can take white away. So that's something always to keep in mind, which is why I always do highlights first and I leave spaces for that open. But on each braid, I leave a space for highlights on each one because I think it looks really nice. Looks like the hair's really shiny in the light, and so I like the look that that gives. And once I'm happy with the highlights and I'm all finished with that, I take my darker purple and I follow the shape of each braid, meaning that it's kind of like a V shape where each of them meet. And so I just follow that line, I shade that, and sometimes I add a few extra lines to show some different strands of hair. But overall, it's pretty straightforward. And if this was a bigger drawing, I would probably add a little bit more blending. I'd probably go back in and blend out some of those dark areas with the base color again. But since this is a little smaller, I'm happy leaving it this way. So the very final thing I do is I take an even darker shade of purple and I go in and darken some of the little tiny detail areas that I want to be just a touch darker for a little bit more contrast. But overall, that is pretty simple, and that's how I do my braids when I color them in. Now I want to show you guys how to put it all together with some of the things that I talked about, and I'm gonna color in a portrait. So let's move on and do that now. So for this portrait, I've sketched out and already inked and colored the skin just a picture of a girl that's a little bit more detailed than what we were working on before, but still simplistic enough that it's easy to follow along with what I'm doing, hopefully. So as you can see, I'm going along with the coloring style that I used in the first eyes that we did, which were the green ones. So that means that I did not use any of my multi-liners or anything to create a harsh pupil in the middle, but instead I went light to dark and I created a pupil in the center using the darkest blue color that I did toward the top of the eyes there. I went in, added the shading of gray under the eyelids there and the highlights, and so that is the eyes. Pretty simple when you break it apart. For the hair, I chose to do a dusty kind of brown color. I really like this shade. I think it's nice and simple without being too crazy like a lot of anime hair can tend to be. So for this one, I went ahead with the base color, mapped out where the highlights are going to be, and then started darkening right underneath the highlights. But instead of darkening at the bottom of the bangs, as I mentioned, I do tend to do that, but I also sometimes like to go lighter there, so I didn't darken that portion because I felt with this drawing that lighter color looked better there. But like I said, you can add that step in. So here I just shade a little bit darker toward the back of her head, anywhere that's really showing, because the head is round, so the sides of her head there are going toward the back. The hair is being pulled up into the pigtails individually. So I add some shading and some lines to show that it's all being pulled up, while the areas going toward the bottom / back of her head are a little darker, and therefore I shade them. For the hairstyle itself, I make a few lines going down to signify strands of hair and pieces of hair and section it off like that. I also add areas with my base color of where the highlights are going to be, and then I go in with some of the darker colors and I shade it a little bit better to blend everything together while still leaving all of the areas open for highlights. So I really like making nice, bright, shiny hair. This hairstyle overall is pretty simplistic and hopefully easy to follow along with. But yeah, it's pretty straightforward once you break down the different steps. It's pretty easy to follow. And if you have any questions about anything that I did in today's tutorials, please let me know in the comments below. I am always here to answer them. If I went too fast on anything or if I didn't explain something well enough, please let me know. Like I said, I'm here for answering any questions you guys might have. So now on to my final thoughts. So guys, I hope that information was helpful to you in some way. I hope you learned a new tip or something that you didn't necessarily know before. Obviously, you can always get creative and vary some of the things that I showed you. You don't have to do it exactly like I do. So as always, I have all of my links in the description box below. I have the link to my online shop, which tomorrow is actually moving to Shopify. So I'm having a huge sale. My Etsy is still remaining open. However, when you go to applemint.com, it will lead you to my brand new website. So go check that out tomorrow if you're interested. I'll be holding a 15% off sale from tomorrow until the 24th at midnight Eastern time. I also have the link to my Instagram account where you can follow me to see things that I don't always post here on the channel. If you're interested in following updates about my shop, you can always follow my Applemint shop account as well. And lastly, I have the link to my Amino where you can join. We have over 20,000 members. You can post your artwork, chat with people. It's a fun, chill place. So go check that out as well. I'll see you guys all next Friday at 4 p.m. Eastern time. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a beautiful day. Bye-bye. This is perfect.